Hey, Chicago, what do you say? It's the CHGO Cubs Podcast coming to you live on this Sunnyside Thursday. This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO. HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 and older, or Illinois medical card holders. Happy Halloween. We have a special guest with us, Greg Huss, co-founder of Northside Bound. We're going to talk prospects today. We're going to talk about the World Series. We're going to talk about our friend Harvey Dent. Batman, anything?
No, nothing.
Ryan
about Harvey Dent.
Ryan will be speaking as Batman the entire show. So if you don't recognize the voice and you're doing podcast form, that is Ryan Herrera dressed as Batman.
I'm Batman.
Justice.
Yeah, definitely podcast listeners go and tune into the YouTube stream and just check this out because it's a scene here on set.
That's right. I'm Bob Wysocki from Norridge, and we're going to go pick up the girls over at the bar right now. Okay?
I'm Bill Murray.
And you're Bill Murray.
I'm Bill Murray, yeah.
Costume provided by the set.
Yes. Basketball
Law,
sign
who are you dressed up
by
as?
Bill Murray, I would hope.
You know, I was going to be.
Period.
I was going to be Cole Kmet, and then I realized there's no costume. You know, I just had my Travis Matthew hat on, peak professional athlete physique already included.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, people aren't going to recognize that it's not Cole. So I went with this. Greg didn't go costume, but he's an Illinois fan.
I didn't get the memo, but
No.
yeah, I'm playing an Illinois fan, which is always scary.
It was kind of decided last second, so it's all good.
It was totally last minute. I see the live YouTube chat is up and rolling. We've got Becky says Rizzo needs to come back. Gary Ross says, what's up, Huss? Shane Newbanks wants somebody dressed up as Little Craig. I'm assuming that's Batman, but it didn't happen. How about this World Series? It's over. The baseball season's officially over. So that's why part of the reason why Greg is here, because we're going to now start to focus on, all right, now everybody's in the offseason. The Cubs have, I think 5 days to set the 40-man, get that straight. That's part of the conversation. But you just had a World Series where yesterday I was talking about all the stars, the 6 or 7 or 8 players that are all better than anybody that's on the Cubs in the World Series. And you had a World Series that I thought was going to be closer than this. And you had a World Series where Ohtani and Judge each went 2 for 25, batted 133 with a combined 11 strikeouts and 1 RBI. Baseball is going to baseball sometimes. You know, I was excited because I wanted to see the superstars. Judge gets his big at bat, and what happens? Catcher's interference. What a way to suck the life out of that at bat.
Well, that was Ohtani, right?
Ohtani, is that what I said? Judge?
Judge, yeah.
Don't listen to Bob. He makes all kinds of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, the way the Yankees blew the game last night, honestly, it's kind of poetic considering what we were talking about yesterday with the fan interference. It was like karma in a way.
What did it remind you of? I saw somebody tweet, I think it might have been Cerami. When was the last time a team won a World Series game and had 3 errors? Game 7.
Oh.
In Cleveland. Your Chicago Cubs. People forget
I mean, I'll say this. I thought the Yankees were being managed by Matt Eberflus last night because that was quite the hits principle they were trying to do.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it got to a point where I was kind of cheering for the Yankees to win the game just so we could see the series extended a little bit because it did become entertaining to me. But like the fall was just too good for me to not enjoy a little bit. So
I was just glad that the 2 fans couldn't get in.
Yeah.
banned from the stadium. Beautiful. I have a question. Does anybody know this? Maybe Greg does. What was the White Sox record when Michael Kopech was traded? He's clearly the first player in baseball history who's ever been on a 121-loss team and won the World Series in the same season. So congratulations to him. That'll never be broken. That record, he will be in history forever with that one.
The change of fortune for Michael Kopech is phenomenal. I mean, you got to feel bad for Miguel Vargas, who was on the Dodgers and went to the White Sox as a part of that trade. I mean, I guess he still gets a ring, right? But
yeah.
Does he get a ring?
You got to feel for him.
Yeah, he was probably watching that like, you did this to me.
Mm-hmm.
You did this to me. Well, maybe he gets to play for Will Venable.
Maybe he'll be turned into a giant Dodgers killer.
Could be.
It's possible.
Batman. Is anybody pleased with like the World Series outcome? Like, I just went through it, and if you go back and you still look at all the World Series champions, I know we're going to talk prospects, and I'm all for the prospects, but I'm for some of the prospects being used as capital, and chess pieces. You're still if you go back and look at it, the teams are all still spending huge amounts of money. Not that the Cubs didn't spend any money, but you're still going back and saying, this team is got a $200 million player. This team's got a $300 million player. This team's got multiple $300 million players. This team's got a $400 million player. Just go back and look at all the World Series champions. You can't just say the best way to do it is only to develop your own players. It's not. Mm-hmm. Spending money also gets it done, and all you have to do is look at the World Series champions from like the last 5 years. It's a combo, right, Batman?
You got to do both.
That's right, Greg. You have to do both.
Yeah.
And to the right level, Greg, right? You can't say, well, I spent some and I have okay prospects. You have to have either great prospects and have some star players. I still say there's no way you can do it without a superstar player. When the Cubs did it, Chris Bryant was a superstar player.
And you also have to have that level of player that the Cubs currently have, those supplemental players.
Yes, you're right.
You have to have all three. You have to have all three elements. And I think the Cubs have right now. The Cubs have two of the three. Right, they have a good farm system. That they've shown the ability to develop players. They also have that level of Ian Happ and Nico Horner and Dansby Swanson, the supplemental players. But you also have to do that third element. You got to get the Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani's, Aaron Judge. Like you have to get those players on your team. You can't just do two of the three. You got to do all three in order to win a World Series. And right now, they're just not doing that third step.
How big do you think the gap is between the World Series champion LA Dodgers, first time since 1988 because the other one didn't count?
Correct.
How big is the gap between that team and what you see currently on the north side at the major league level? To me, it's the Grand Canyon. I know baseball could baseball, and you could stumble into something like the Diamondbacks did, but the difference between having a bunch of nice players or good players or very good players and having superstar players, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars potentially.
Yeah, I was going to say the gap is $500 million is what the gap is, right? Whether that's two superstar, at least, right? It's a couple superstar players on your roster that you don't have now, and it's actually pretty easy to set that gap. It's 500, 600, however many $1 million it takes to sign a couple superstars or trade for, right? It doesn't have to be signed, but players that are worth that amount of money, and that's what the gap is, 100%.
Our leader, Tony Gill. He said in our Slack last night, are the Dodgers the most perfect organization in sports?
Perfect organization in sports?
I got to say they probably are.
Are we going to keep this up the whole – is this bit really going to keep going?
Until my voice hurts, then I'll stop. But
just checking.
Dodgers win the World Series. They have all the money. Their farm system right now, or mid-season, was ranked ahead of the Cubs. It doesn't get much better than the Dodgers organization.
Can he go back to being Bruce?
Mm-hmm. I wish he'd go back to being Ryan Herrera. Not a great listen for podcasters.
Are Dodgers won, but they bought it. Who cares, Niren? Like, you could buy it, develop it. I don't care how you get it.
Yeah.
Why? Right? Like, didn't we sell our souls for that one on the moment that you traded for Chapman?
Yeah.
Right. Like, How you did it, forget about it. Doesn't matter. Don't care how you did it. Unless you were hurting someone. Don't care.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't care if they did it spending money. Good for them.
I think that, like Greg said it, like the gap, whether it's the money or just the type of players, like I think we all know what the Cubs lack here. And that's why it can be very frustrating watching the major league team because you see that they have a lot of really good complementary players, but they don't have a Shohei Ohtani type or anything like anyone even like halfway close to him, which is a lot of teams don't.
Right.
But like I could even go down to Mookie Betts' level. Mookie Betts.
They don't have Freddie Freeman.
Sure. That like Mookie Betts, not only is he one of the better, hitters in baseball, but he's also really versatile. They played him all over the field this year. He just does everything you need from the guys that are making the most money on the team to have success. And so it's just, again, I still think that their best opportunity or their best, most realistic thing they can do this offseason to get that type of player is via trade. I'm not gonna have any hope for Juan Soto or anyone until the organization proves me otherwise.
Well, I'm gonna go back to my regular voice because my throat hurts.
Oh, thank goodness.
I mean, I and this can help lead us into the prospect conversation with Greg, but like everyone says the Dodgers bought World Series, whatever, and like that's true to an extent, right? They paid Shohei Ohtani a lot of money, paid Freddie Freeman a lot of money, but a lot of their players are also homegrown, like they developed them, or Mookie Betts traded good prospects, good players to get him, right? You have to have both. You have to have, well, as Greg said, there's like 3 different things you got to have. You got to have all parts of your organization working together, and a big part of that is the prospects, Greg, like you said, being able to like supplement the roster with cheap, good young talent, or being able to trade, to go get that superstar. The Dodgers have figured out the formula to get that, so to speak. And so I'm curious what Greg thinks about the Cubs' ability to get to that level where, I mean, the farm system is in a good place. I think we can all agree on that. They have a lot of prospects and good prospects that probably aren't going to play for the Cubs in their major league career if they ever get there. Like, do you think the Cubs are in a spot where they can and should start, using some of that prospect capital to make some of these major league deals that we've seen? And I know they did that with Michael Busch, like that counts too. But to make some of these bigger deals that we've seen, like the Dodgers make.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that there's 2 different ways you can go out and get a superstar. I mean, Cody mentioned that the way that makes the most sense is by trading, like you're kind of hinting at, Ryan. I think that you can't. I mean, the Chicago Cubs can go out and sign Juan Soto. They won't sign Juan Soto, but they could if they wanted to. But you're right. If you look at like the Michael Busch trade, right? They traded Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope, 2 guys that were, in my eyes at the time, borderline top 100 prospects, and now they are both top 100 prospects. And so that is a level of player in Michael Busch that you get back from a guy from a trade package like that. Well, the Cubs are set up really, really well right now that they have all these guys up in AAA that are top 100 prospects. You have Owen Casey and you have Matt Shaw. Cade Horton is there. James Triantos and Kevin Alcantara, and all these guys are currently in AAA and they're ready. So I think that those guys can be packaged for a star level player, that player that we're wanting to see on the Chicago Cubs. And because these guys like Owen Casey and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but like Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros, like these guys aren't necessarily going to come up next year in 2025 and be better than Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki and Nico Horner, right? Like those are their rookie year, expecting them to be 3-win players. Like that's not a reasonable expectation. And when you're in a position right now where you are in win now mode, where you want to be successful in 2025, then calling up those prospects and letting them go through some growing pains isn't going to make sense for your team. What does make sense is trading those guys to a team that can give them time to develop at the major league level, and in turn getting somebody like Vlad Guerrero Jr. or insert star player here, right? You can get someone who can help your major league roster and make them a good team right now, which I think that Owen Casey could help the Chicago Cubs in 2025, but not to the level that we're hoping in the star player conversation.
He is Greg Huss, the co-founder of Northside Bound. We're going to talk prospects here again after a quick moment to talk about some of our great sponsors. Did you guys know that ComEd can help businesses save money by becoming more energy efficient?
Luke, before you just told me right now, I did not know that.
Yeah, the energy efficiency program can help find up to 35% in energy savings. How about that?
Wait, if it's that easy, like, what does a business have to do to get there?
All they got to do is sign up for a free facility assessment at comed.com/biz.
And like I said, like, that sounds easy. Why aren't more businesses doing it, Luke?
All I can think of is maybe they forgot the website.
Maybe.
Comed.com/biz. Comed.com/biz. Comed.com.
That'll do it, Batman. Thank you. Terms and conditions apply. Offers are subject to change. Actual savings will vary by customer's energy usage and rate. The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program is funded in compliance with state law.
Luke, I got to tell you about Empire Today, because with Empire Today, you get shop-at-home convenience, the right product for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a low price guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring, so of course they have copycats. But Empire can't be beaten on quality, service, speed, so competitors advertise low-quality products that Empire simply won't carry. Empire won't promise the lowest prices, because anyone who does that is putting flooring in your home that you wouldn't put in theirs. They keep shopping for floors simple with a curated product selection. Their philosophy is to help you find what you need and not overwhelm you with thousands of choices. What they leave out of their selection is as important as what they put in. Empire's product team exhaustively combs through thousands of product samples each year to find the perfect styles. Their virtual floor designer is a great way to see how new floors will look in any space. It's easy, just snap a picture and instantly see how new floors will look in your room. Shopping for floors at a big box store can be frustrating. You might talk to someone today who was working in plumbing yesterday. Flooring is all Empire Today does. They live and breathe flooring, so you can be confident you're getting honest, upfront advice. And they service their own warranty, so if an issue does arise, just call Empire. They will service the warranty themselves. You won't have to track down a manufacturer's phone number to do so. So schedule a free in-home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code CHGO. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/CHGO for details.
Dylan in the live YouTube chat says, I became a diehard this week. Will Ryan's character work or make its way into any of the exclusive content? Hey, welcome to the diehard program. $48. Limited time offer. Lowest ever. And thank you. I don't know about that. Well,
he could just go into the Discord in his Batman costume and do the video chat with the people.
Batman's mailbag, we'll start to call it.
Yeah.
Justice.
There's breaking news. Some of the people in the chat are.
Wait a minute. Soto to the Cubs?
Not yet.
Not yet.
They got to wait another 4 days for that to be possible.
Not yet. It's too early. Too soon. Okay, Cody, what is it?
I'm letting you know I ain't going to laugh at that at all this offseason. According to Patrick Mooney, the Cubs are adding Quentin Berry, Cubs legend, to Craig Counsell's coaching staff. He'll be the, I think, third base coach. He's a base running expert. I think
really athletic third base coach.
Yeah, athletic. Yeah. So, Craig Counsell bringing in one of his guys. He was in Milwaukee. So,
wave him home Q, as we're going to say now. We'll see. We'll find out.
The Cubs envisioned him as like a Dave Roberts type guy. In the story, I was skimming it as you guys are doing the ads. When he was with the Cubs in 2015, they envisioned him as like a Dave Roberts type. Could have been got a big stolen base in a big moment for them.
He could be the next Will Venable.
Sure, yeah.
I have a question for Greg that I was asking yesterday, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or what your opinion might be on it, Greg. We're talking to Greg Huss, and my question was this. The Cubs have what, 7, 8 top 100 prospects? I don't know what the exact number is, but whatever that number is. Of top 100 prospects each year, then Cody went back and started looking. How many of those guys, or what percentage of a top 100 prospect list each year actually ends up becoming a superstar or an all-star? It has to be like less than 5%, right? Like much lower than 5%?
I'd say 5 max. Right? I mean, how many superstars are there across the league?
Right,
across the 30 teams. You know,
all right, just say all-star.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say probably 5 to 10. I'd have to go back and do some Dell metrics to figure that out. But yeah, I'd say 5 to 10.
Well, there's
a ratio where they're 5 to 10 all-stars. There's a lot of the players are everyday players. Some guys are up and down players. Some guys fizzle out. And part of that too is if you look up and down a top 100, it's dependent on the publication and how much they value like high upside guys versus safe guys that are already in AAA. If a publication is ranking a whole bunch of guys that are high upside but they're in low A, it's like there's going to be a greater percentage of those guys that fizzle out and don't make the major leagues at all. It probably depends on the publication, but as far as all-stars, 5, 10, something like that. Yeah.
I guess that's what I know I'm a hypocrite on this, but it's why when they were building the prospects, I said, well, you don't trade all these guys to then trade all the prospects, right? I was like, you have to have the young players so you can go spend when you need to go spend. That's right, but they're at that spot. And so now I do want to see some trades start to happen because I look at that list and I say, great, 7, 8 top 100 prospects, whatever number you want to say, whatever your list might be, you look at that and you say, okay, but how many of them are going to be better than what Ian Happ is in left field? How many are, like Greg said, how many are going to be better than Seiya next year? Because I want to start winning as a Cubs fan next year. It doesn't have to be the World Series, but you better damn be in the playoffs next year. If you're not, lots of heads better roll.
He's getting fired up over here.
Right? So, you have to start moving some of these guys because how many of them are actually – We've established that the Cubs have good to very good, sometimes players on the roster. We just gave out grades, and a lot of guys got Bs. Some guys got As. How often are these prospects going to come up and replace that guy? You hope that 1 or 2 of them does, but that means 6 others have to be traded or at least be used somehow to help the organization.
I am hardly a Jed Hoyer apologist. Don't get that twisted. He has though put together a good farm system, but now the important thing, it becomes so important to trade away the right guys. Right? You've got all these prospects that are good. Now you've got to trust your internal evaluation of these players as to who will end up being a good major league player, and not trade out those guys. Keep those guys. And trade away the guys that you feel not as confident in, right? So when the Cubs traded away Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope, I came on the show. I was right after that trade came through and the Cubs got Michael Busch. I came on the show and I was complaining about how I thought the Cubs sold too early on Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope. How I thought both of those guys would end up becoming more valuable, whether it's as prospects or as players, than they were at that moment. And sure enough, now Zaire Hope, I know Just Baseball just released their top 100 prospects, and Zaire Hope was a top 30 prospect in baseball. At the time, consensus was that he was outside the top 150. I was called crazy for putting him at 13 on my Cubs list last year. So I think that the secret is not trading a guy below what their value will ultimately end up being. I think that I'm thinking back to the trade deadline this past year when the Cubs got Paredes. When they traded Morel, but part of that package was they traded Ty Johnson, who at the time looked like a throw-in trade piece. But I know that the Tampa Bay Rays valued Ty Johnson a lot. And he was a guy who, in a few years, could look really impressive for the Tampa Bay Rays, but he appeared as a throw-in piece. The Cubs can't trade away those guys. They can't choose that Kevin Alcantara is worth trading away only for him to break out with a new organization. That can't happen. They have to choose wisely from this group of 8 top 100 prospects that they have, who gets traded, who gets kept, and who gets promoted up to the major leagues. That's a tricky thing, and that is what Jed Hoyer keeps hanging his hat on. Right now, he can hang his hat on the fact that he's put together a good farm system, but this next year is going to be so important for not ruining this farm system that you put together, I guess.
I wonder what you think of this point I'm about to make, and I've said it before, but you mentioned obviously not trading guys below what their value will eventually be, and getting that right, and that all works. But at some point, you do have to trade value for value, and potentially take a risk on a guy you trade away being becoming something bigger than what you thought he could be. And so I look at it like the Dodgers, right? The Dodgers traded Michael Busch, who was a really good top 100 prospect, because obviously he was blocked at the major league level, but they also have a lot of faith that they will be able to develop the next Michael Busch when the time is needed, right? So my point is, isn't that also where the Cubs should be striving to get to, where you can you could take a risk in trading someone like a Zahir Hope or a Jackson Ferris because your farm system has improved to the point where you have faith that you can develop the next Jackson Ferris or whatever, or Zahir Hope. Like, isn't that a point where the Cubs should also be looking at, is we can take a risk on trading this guy we might think a little highly of because we're confident we can develop the next guy who will take that place?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think you look at Matt Shaw and James Triantos, right? Both very similar types of players. Contact-oriented approach. They're both guys that play second, can play third, maybe some outfield. Very similar players. Well, you can trade one of those guys. You can trade Matt Shaw or James Triantos and still have the other one in your system. You can still have another guy that's ready for a call-up this year in Chicago. Same thing can be said about guys lower in the system, right? Where you have a guy like Jefferson Rojas, who's a top 100 prospect. And if the Cubs feel really confident that they can develop Angel Cepeda or Derniche Valdez, some of these guys that are in the complex league, the very low levels of the minors, well, that means they can stomach the idea of trading away Jefferson Rojas as a part of one of these trades. So, yeah, it's having more guys coming in behind. Yeah. So much of it is drafting well, signing well, but also drafting well. And not drafting well, I think a lot of times the focus is like, oh, they got to get that first round draft pick. They got to get that second round draft pick. Yeah, obviously, every team needs to hit the first and second round draft pick. That's if you're arguing that the Cubs should do that, then okay, join. Everyone knows that that's the case. What they need to do and what they have been doing well the past few years under Dan Kantrovitz is they've been drafting well in rounds 6 through 12. Right, that's where they got Zahir Hope. That's where they got Brandon Birdsell was a I think 6th round draft pick. Mm-hmm. Brandon Birdsell was the Cubs minor league pitcher of the year this year. And being able to develop a guy from the 6th round draft pick to that is really, really important.
I think that's a good point. And also what I've been saying, and we all have, is you can't, they do have to pick the right players, right? But other teams are evaluating all these players at the minor league level as well. And just because you might think James Triantos has a really high ceiling, let's just use him as an example. I'm not saying specifically trade Triantos over Shaw or Smith or whoever, but say it's Triantos and you do value him highly. That's great, but another team might want him, and if they're going to give you Vlad Guerrero back, you have to be willing to part with that prospect. You have to be willing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you don't want to trade the next Tatis you don't want to lose Tatis like the White Sox did. But if you end up trading the next Eloy Jimenez, that's okay. But either way, you can still like the player and trade him. You're not going to trade only the guys you think might not get there, right? Because that's not the way.
Probably have the same kind of information.
It's not the way business works at Major League Baseball. Other teams have scouting departments too. And by the way, I'm a little concerned that we are now going into the season. We all agree they're probably going to have to pull a trade. I thought it was going to be last year. I guess it was Bush, but I thought it was going to be more than that. The trade's going to have to happen this season, and we're counting on the scouting of your own players. And didn't they just lay off a bunch of their own scouts? So we're counting on the department that just had layoffs? That doesn't feel good in my stomach. I'll be honest with you, it doesn't.
That kind of goes into the question I was going to bring up, and I guess Greg, you kind of already answered it a little bit. My thing that I've said a lot is that I truly don't really care who you trade as long as you keep developing and drafting well. Which, we always look back at the Quintana trade. They traded Cease and they traded Eloy Jimenez, and after that, they didn't really have anyone huge in the system for a while until except for a Miguel Amaya, Braylon Marquez, right? But the system has taken massive steps forward since then to where we're sitting here in some ways complaining about having 8 guys in the top 100. It feels like it. I shouldn't be complaining about this, right? So my thing is in general, I think most people are pretty content with Dan Kantrovitz. What is a whole with him leading the helm there? How do you feel about where they are with developing, scouting, drafting, stuff like that?
Yeah, drafting, I think they've done a phenomenal job. Since that 2020 draft, which was Dan Kantrovitz's first draft, I believe, in 2020, which was just the strangest of circumstances, obviously. Since 2021, he has done a phenomenal job, both in terms of his high draft picks and the later round draft picks, drafting and signing and then developing those guys and identifying guys that fit what their development staff looks for in trying to make these players better. And so, I think he's done a phenomenal job. I think that there's plenty of calls. I think that this also kind of transitions a little bit into like, I know there's plenty of talk and your guys' Brendan Miller is one of the people that kind of shouts this from the rooftops in terms of aggressive promotions up to the major leagues. And so they are developing these players. And I think that it is worthwhile having that conversation of like, okay, should these guys be promoted to the major leagues quicker? Should they be promoted up the minor leagues quicker? Are they doing it appropriately right now? I think that I kind of lean on the side that they're doing it appropriately. I know that Cody, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but I think that they're kind of doing it appropriately right now. They're getting these guys up through the minors quick. Now, the major league conversation is probably a different conversation worth having. They are promoting up through the minor league system quick. Owen Casey has been super young for the average age of his level throughout his entire time in the minors, as is the case for Jefferson Rojas, who's up in high A, and there was rumblings about him starting this past year in Double A, which is crazy at 19. Even like Moises Ballesteros, 20 years old, up in AAA. Kevin Alcantara made his major league debut, and he's still super, super young. Like, all these guys are flying through the minor leagues. Now, getting up to the majors, I think that like they've been a little bit slower in doing so. But like I can't really point to a specific circumstance where the Cubs really fumbled it recently with these top 100 prospects, with the guys that are top 100 guys in terms of promoting them up to the major leagues this past year. My one exception with that is there was that stretch where Moises Ballesteros promotion did make sense. It was before Miguel Amaya had kind of figured it out with the stick. He was the catching situation was rough at the major leagues for that stretch. At the same time, when Moises Ballesteros was going off on a tremendous hot streak, that would have been the time. Things kind of worked itself out where the major league catching situation worked itself out a little bit, enough, and Moises Ballesteros took a step back when he reached AAA. So I don't know. I go back and forth, but I think that my one thing I look at with that development is as soon as a guy's ready to get promoted up to high A or Double A or Triple A, they're doing it, and they're doing it pretty immediately.
More from Greg Huss in a second. First, Cody's going to tell us about our great partners at Sunnyside.
Yeah, our friends at Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary are here to elevate your summer. Sunnyside is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. They have a crazy selection with over 100 different strains to choose from with easy online ordering and in-store pickup wherever you are in Illinois. Sunnyside has a location for you. They have spots as far south as Champaign, Greg, all right, and as far north as South Beloit. Stop in the nearest store to you for expert guidance from their staff, or select from quality lines like Cresco and Florcal. Available now, Luke. I know you keep forgetting because you're, a little bit older. You're very forgetful.
Thanks, Cody.
They got a new one. It's it's from Good News called Island Vibes. All right, you need to try it because your vibe and Island Vibes it just goes together. Okay.
The only problem with Island Vibes is the sand gets in your mustache.
Our good pal Corey Freeman, I always say this, he can't shut up about Mindy Siegel's award-winning chocolates at Sunnyside. It's his favorite. He talks to me about it every single day. He'll send me text messages. Man, Mindy's just really hit different today. All right. You too can be like Corey, and he can get those award-winning chocolates by going to sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases when you use the promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright buys every day only for 21 plus or Illinois medical card holders.
Rhoback Activewear. Y'all know by now that we wear Rhoback all the time. It's quite simple. Best fit, best feel. Quality of the gear just speaks for itself. Their performance polos perform better in the heat than any polo out there. They're moisture wicking so the polo doesn't stick to you and has a nice little stretch to it. And with fall here, add one of their performance hoodies to your closet. They're the softest items we own. We can't take them off. Those polos are just the best looking, best fitting polos out there. Those hoodies, designed for comfort and built for activity, moisture wicking, breathable fabric, and the everyday shorts are just so versatile. You wear them with a polo untucked or a tee on the move, elastic waistband, good for us, and easy comfort, nice stretchy fabric, clean look, no matter the occasion. So use the code CHGO Cubs 20 on rowback.com for a generous 20% off your first order. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all polos, hoodies, and shorts with the code CHGO Cubs 20. Make sure to check them out, and they'll have you ready for whatever travels and activities you have. Cody, underneath his jersey, has the rollback hoodie.
I do. It's very
First
soft.
thing he said when he walked in, you want to touch my hoodie? And that's a constant theme around here. Everybody walking around, you want to feel my hoodie? You want to touch my hoodie?
Yeah.
It's a little aggressive.
It is, but
It's
then you touch
respectfully.
the hoodie and you understand.
That's true.
Sure,
You're like,
Feels like butter.
it wasn't creepy. They were just letting me feel the fabric.
Okay. So I kind of want to reply to Greg.
Yes, go ahead.
Because he asked me, he wanted to get my perspective on prospect aggressiveness, and that's something that we've talked a lot about on this show. And you brought up Brendan, not this past Friday, but the Friday before. I jumped in the Friday show with Brendan because Corey couldn't make it on there, and we talked a lot about
Too much
that.
Mindy's?
What'd you say?
Too much Mindy's?
Too much
Never.
Mindy's. He also had to go to a wedding, and he asked me to walk his dog. Credit to me for doing all of that. Anyway,
You're like his assistant.
he does pay me to walk the dog. But,
He also does get to go to get coffee with his girlfriend, so.
That's
Ooh,
true.
That's another
true.
story.
Forgot about
That's
that
true.
one.
Kate's
Let's
my
not
good friend.
start rumors.
Where was I getting at? Oh yeah, we were talking about prospect aggressiveness, and I think I hear what a lot of I think your perspective, I hear it, and I don't even necessarily disagree. I guess for me, it's just it's almost like the Cubs set themselves up for failure by not doing enough in the offseason for the major league team, because you bring up Ballesteros, and you can make the argument that maybe they should have promoted him early just to be a little aggressive because he was having that insane hot streak in Double-A, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in May and June, dude, not only was Swanson and Horner hurt multiple times, but Swanson having the terrible season that he was having offensively and just the entire offense struggling. My thing is you didn't do enough in the offseason. We all know it. And you tout these prospects to us. Why not just I felt like Matt Shaw made so much sense. I know he struggled the first month of the minor league season, but he was a college player. Hell, the big national prospect guys even said that Matt Shaw could debut this past season.
Nobody's bigger than Huss.
That's true. I'm just saying though that it is it is a thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if it would have happened, it would have led to more wins or that things would have been fixed or anything. It was just at a point where it's we're 8-9 games under 500, and this team, they're going to need a miracle run to make the playoffs. We might as well learn some things about some guys along the way to have some sort of answer going into this offseason. And they didn't. The only answer that we really got was PCA and Michael Bush, which is great.
And Morel.
And Morel, I guess, in terms of a failure, right? I went into 24 with some little bit of optimism of at least learning about Shaw and maybe Casey at the end of the year. And we didn't see either one of them. We saw Alcantara because Seiya Suzuki got hurt. And it was actually surprising to me that they even called him up, but I'm assuming it's just because he's on the 40-man, right? Every time I get into these discussions or arguments with people about the prospects, everyone brings up the 40-man and the implementation of trying to take a guy off and putting this guy. And it's just there is not one player on this team, man, that I should take that back. There isn't enough players on this team where it's you have to have him on the 40-man. I just don't understand that. So when we talk about prospect aggressiveness, I guess for me, it's just I feel disappointed that the Cubs weren't more aggressive in that realm this year, considering you went into a year where you had expectations to make the playoffs and you didn't do nearly enough in the offseason to make the team better. So when you look at expectations for the organization going into 24, it's like, what are we doing, man? Like, yeah. And so whenever I got people tell me, oh, well, there's less minor league teams now, and so going from low A to high A, then double A and triple A, like, they need more time in this. It's just like, all right, well, then why aren't the Cubs saying that in their own heads? Maybe they are, but like, I don't know. I'm spiraling now, and I'm like, going back and forth.
I think you're right, though. Like, I think you're right that, like, so the problem. I mean, we can get into a conversation, and Brendan and I did on my Cubs on Deck podcast a few weeks ago about like the idea of being more aggressive and like the digging into the weeds on that. I don't want to, like, that takes an entire episode. I don't want to talk about that here, but I think that you're right in that it's because of the way the major league team was constructed that we're upset that prospects weren't promoted. Entering 2024, we did not, like, I think I came on here and said we should not expect Owen Casey in Chicago this year. We should not expect Matt Shaw in Chicago this year. You shouldn't promote prospects to the major league level in order to fill needs that have arisen throughout the season, right? You should stay true to that development path of a prospect. Whether you think it should be quick, whether you think it should be slow, whatever it is, you should stay on that development path. A major league team should be constructed that those pieces are supplemental once they reach the majors, right? If you need Matt Shaw, it's because he's killing it in AAA. It's because he's putting up a 900 OPS in AAA, and he needs to be in Chicago. There's nothing else he can do in AAA anymore, right? That's why you should call a guy up to the major league level. The major league team shouldn't impact that development of minor league players. We saw that with Ian Happ. We saw that with Kyle Schwarber. We saw that with all these different prospects that came up, and they weren't ready, right? They got called up to the major leagues because the major league team was in win now mode. Ian Happ wasn't ready. He struggled. He had to be sent back down to AAA, and then you called him back up. Kyle Schwarber was that same way where he struggled and had to be sent back down and called back up. The major league team needs to be constructed better. That's all it comes down to, right? Like, you're mad that and a lot of people, I am too, that the major league team was not constructed better. If the major league team was constructed better, you wouldn't be angry about these prospects not being called up. That's the way I view it, at least.
And that's absolutely fair. And again, like I said, if I'm not trying to say that if they call up Casey or they call up Shaw or whoever, that wins would have magically started happening. I think a lot of fans have that mindset or whatever, because don't get me started on how many times I'm told on social media or whatever that, oh, if this guy was in this spot, they would have won this game. And it's just like, no, like, we don't know anything about these prospects. I guess, like, to just kind of hammer down on what you're saying too, is just like the team wasn't constructed well enough. And I guess the little optimism I had for the team going into 24 was the fact that maybe they would have shown a little bit more aggressiveness with prospect promotion to maybe, help the team get over the top. And I guess I envisioned it kind of like 2015. But, it's
not 2015.
It's not 2015.
The players are.
Also, I'll address something that I'm seeing in the chat a lot. I see it on social media a lot. The Cubs aren't slower than they used to be in terms of calling up prospects. They're not slower than other teams. They're not slower. They're not slow paced comparatively to other organizations or to themselves from a few years ago. Remember when the Cubs called up Chris Bryant and Addison Russell and Jorge Soler, and those were top 20 prospects in all of baseball. Chris Bryant was a unicorn. He won the college player of the year. He won the minor league player of the year. He was not normal. This is not a slow process. It's not like we've gotten slower over the past decade. We haven't gotten slower compared to other teams. This is just something that we're frustrated about what we're seeing in Chicago, and it's spilling over into prospects.
So, Greg, which Cubs prospect in your mind, A, made the biggest leap in 2024, whether that is a guy from A to AAA or a guy from AA to the majors, whatever that jump may be, or maybe there's a couple of them. And then B, which player, if you had to guess right now, will be the next one to bust down the door, not like Chris Bryant, but in the way that he forced the issue, whether it's whatever player that you're talking about, that's the best way to develop. Which player will force the Cubs' hand into making a roster move, whether that's creating a spot on the major league roster and moving somebody out of the way, or just we've got to get this guy into the lineup some way now because he is ready now and we're wasting him in the minor leagues. Mm-hmm. What guys would fit into those roles for you?
Yeah, in terms of a guy that will kind of be busting down the door and you'll need to find a spot for him, I think that Moises Ballesteros and Matt Shaw are those guys. I think that Owen Casey is very, very good. I think Kevin Alcantara is very good. I think James Francis, all these guys in AAA are good. But in terms of a guy whose offensive profile will translate well to the major league level, that's Moises Ballesteros and Matt Shaw. I don't think that they will come up and struggle mightily in their first 3 weeks. If they do, that's another conversation. But you look at Owen Casey, right? His profile of being a guy who can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but also strikes out at a 28 to 30% clip. Like that doesn't really age well not age well. That's not the right phrase. That doesn't translate super well to a safe bet for the first few weeks of his major league career, right? So Moises Ballesteros will translate well in terms of him being able to use all fields, him being able to hit for average, him showing off some pop as well. And I think that will be the guy where like they'll need to find a spot. And I think that Moises Ballesteros is probably the guy that in his rookie year they're able to find a spot for him pretty easily, right? If they throw him in at the DH slot, give him if they trust in him catching behind the plate, give him some starts behind the plate as well. Maybe give him some starts at first base, right? I think that like he might fit in well with the major league team, and so that might go over well. Matt Shaw, I think, is the exact same way. Where I've been kind of beating the drum on Matt Shaw in terms of where he will play in Chicago starting next year. I think that he can play some third base. I think he can play some second base and some corner outfield as well and be perfectly fine. And I think that he can get a full season, damn near a full season's worth of at-bats in Chicago by bouncing around from spot to spot. Obviously, that's not ideal. Like you want him to be able to just man third base or man second base and be good for the entire year. But I think that you can get Matt Shaw a ton of at-bats by being that first sub that plays nearly every day, filling in for the injured Nico Horner or Paredes at third or whoever it might be, or DHing a little bit. So I think both those guys could transition well and will be kind of beating down the door for Chicago next year. You also kind of, Luke, hit on a guy who's made the biggest jump from over the course of this past season. And for me, the answer is like very clearly Brandon Birdsell. I know I mentioned him before earlier in this episode, but I think that Birdsell he went from a guy who was kind of viewed as organizational depth, not even like major league depth, but like organizational depth, where he was kind of like, he'll probably make it up to AAA and he'll be there for quite a few years in AAA. And if you absolutely need a spot starter once a year, then you can call up Brandon Birdsell. That was how he was entering the season. And he exited this 2024 season. He's a top 10 prospect in my eyes, or right around there, 10 to 12 prospect in the organization. Cubs minor league pitcher of the year. The stuff made a big, the numbers were good. The stuff made a big jump from 23 to 24, where he's now got a fastball in the mid 90s. He does this really fun thing. So Brandon Birdsell goes out there on the mound, and I actually just interviewed him. I'll have him on the Cubs on Deck podcast dropping on Tuesday morning. He came on the show with me, and we talked for about 45 minutes. It was terrific. But he kind of walks through his pitch mix, where he's got a four-seam fastball, he's got a cutter, and he's got a slider. And each of those pitches, he kind of manipulates in different ways. So it can be a four-seam fastball kind of riding up with the zone. It could be a cut-ride fastball like we see from Justin Steele. It can be a true cutter. It can be a little like cutter, slider, slutter action. It can be a true slider, a sweeper, a curveball. Like he kind of teeters this whole scale of manipulating his pitches in a really, really fun way. And so Brandon Birdsell is like firmly on the map for me for a guy that could get some innings next year in Chicago.
Interesting.
Greg, you mentioned Ballesteros, and I think obviously he's a guy that seems to have high upside. He's doing as well as he is, that as young of a age as he is, and you don't see that often. But you've kind of mentioned it, like finding a spot for him. And while we've heard that he's shown improvements behind the plate, there are obviously still concerns of if he can do that at the major league level. I think with Miguel Amaya's second half proved some things and shown that he can be a major league catcher, not necessarily a clear-cut number one behind the plate, but a major league catcher. But I'm still kind of like, where is your confidence level that Moises Ballesteros can be a catcher at the major league level, and or do the Cubs really need to address that in some fashion? Because, like I said, like Miguel Amaya is not necessarily a clear-cut number one catcher either at this point in his career.
Very, very big of you guys to make it 50 minutes into this podcast without asking about Moises Ballesteros' defense. That's really impressive. This is the single question that I get the most of any other questions about Cubs prospects is Moises Ballesteros' defense. And I've been very upfront that keeping track of a prospect's defense is the single hardest thing for me to do. It's just the way I consume these prospects in terms of like watching them every single night is the best way to watch defense is just to watch an entire game from start to finish. And that's not how I'm watching these games predominantly. I'm tuning in for a specific pitcher. Now it's a little bit easier or at bat or things like that. It's a little bit easier with a catcher, obviously, because I'm already watching the pitcher. He's not there yet. And so I don't think that Moises Ballesteros can be a full-time starting catcher as of right now. That doesn't mean that he can't improve and get to there eventually, but I just don't think that the mobility and his ability to block pitches and the agility behind the plate is quite there. And his arm is pretty good. Like, he has a pretty strong arm behind the plate, which is impressive. However, it's one thing to have a strong arm. It's another thing to be agile enough back there to receive the pitch and then get the ball out of your hand quick enough. It's just the matter of being agile enough back there behind the plate. And I don't think he's there quite yet. Now you throw him into the mix where it's really tough for can Moises Ballesteros be a guy who catches 30 games a year? I don't know, man. That there's no precedent for that, right? Like, that doesn't exist. That was the story for Kyle Schwarber when he was called up. He'd be a great third catcher who can catch 25 times a year. It's like that doesn't happen. Like, you don't get a player that does that because catching takes so much work. Catching only to find out, oh, like, I'm only doing it a few times a year. That doesn't make sense. We saw that with who's the guy that was with the Rangers last year with the Mariners.
Oh,
we lost Greg for a second. I think one of the points. Oh, he's back. Are you back?
Sorry, guys. Yeah. Oh, I think I'm off and on. Sorry, guys.
It's Gremlins.
Yeah. No, I think it's tough to see Moises Ballesteros as a third catcher. I don't really see that as a profile moving forward.
It's fair.
Yeah, I think, what's hard about predicting whether or not he's going to be a catcher too is that the Cubs have currently given us this philosophy of defense. Like, we're going to excel at defense. And if you're going to try and flip the script and say, all right, maybe we'll go all pitching heavy. If can they make a play for Corbin Burns? I don't know. Walker Buehler? I don't know. But, like, if that's going to be the strength of your team is defense and pitching, then you certainly don't want your catcher being suspect. That's why they got rid of Wilson Contreras. At least one of the reasons, right? Like, they didn't value his game calling, his pitch framing, all those things as much as they did other guys. So a question with Ballesteros becomes, how does he fit on the roster? People have said, Niren said DH. Greg mentioned DH. And then I say, well, yeah, but I kind of want Seiya to be the DH if he's going to be around, right? Like, so again, it's a mixture of things. I don't know which guys are going to get called up, and nobody can tell us. Not even the great Greg Huss can tell us exactly who's going to be called up because we don't know which guys the Cubs are willing to move on from. When they start to trim the 40-man roster and add guys that have to be added, I guess that's the first sign. Is there somebody you're looking at? First of all, who has to be added to the 40-man right now?
Owen Casey's going to get added. He's the big name this offseason.
So Casey, and now you start moving off other names from that. It shouldn't be that hard, as Cody was saying, to remove 4 or 5 names from that 40-man, to be quite honest with you. And that's how we ended up in this spot.
Yeah.
83 wins and not in the playoffs, because it's not that difficult to find 3-4 names where you can say, we can move on and we can create that space for Owen Casey on the 40-man. Right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's just true.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, Greg. A lot of people are down on Paredes right now. Rightfully so. He didn't have a good 2 months with the Cubs. And so, we talked about Shaw a little bit. Can play a little all around across the infield. You think he can play a little corner outfield, whatever. So he's an option that can get some time at third next year. But I don't necessarily understand why this particular player I'm about to say has been brought up to me, because I just don't envision the Cubs being this aggressive with him. But, like, Cam Smith, like, is he more of a 2026 guy, if anything? Or do you think that he legitimately has a shot to maybe make come help the team next year, barring massive injuries or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should view Cam Smith pretty similar to what we viewed Matt Shaw entering last year, but a little bit more conservative in terms of his promotion up to the bigs, because I think there's a few additional tweaks that Cam Smith will need to see to his swing and his stance that Matt Shaw didn't necessarily have to see. So there's a little bit more development there needed with Cam Smith than Matt Shaw. But yeah, I mean, if we see Cam Smith in 2025, we should lose our minds. It should be it'll be kind of crazy, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I figured as well too.
Yeah,
but he's good, man. I think that he's a true third, as opposed to Matt Shaw. I don't see Matt Shaw as a third baseman. I really don't. I see Cam Smith as of right now as a third baseman. We'll see some more defense from him next year. Obviously, I haven't seen a ton, but at first glance, I think that Cam Smith does profile as a true third baseman versus Matt Shaw. I see more at second base than third.
Okay. And the player that would make you vomit if the Cubs did include them in a trade.
Oh man,
is there a guy that you would physically hurl if the Cubs included him in a trade for any player?
Yeah. So I think you guys asked me this last year too. I think
every time.
I think that I mentioned Jackson Ferris, and my reason for that was, I mean, all these top prospects are great, right? The Matt Shaws and Moises Ballesteros, all these guys are great. But I'm going to go back to what I mentioned before. It's like, hey, don't trade this guy before he reaches that peak value, right? Yeah. I think that all of our top prospects are pretty close to that peak value as of right now. So if you're trading them, you're probably getting something pretty damn good back in return. Yeah. So let me go down my list. I think that in the same breath as Jackson Ferris last year, I kind of view Jackson Wiggins this year. Jackson Wiggins was a Cubs second round pick back in 2023. And he returned from injury this past year and looked really, really strong. He's going to be another guy that's right around the top 10 or so prospects in the organization for me. I think that Jackson Wiggins, if the Cubs trade him, it'll be too soon, and I don't think they'll get enough in return. I think that he right now would be a secondary piece in a trade for a stud player. And I think that if you wait, I think that he would have the value this time next year as a guy that's the number one, the primary piece in a trade for a big star. Not that you would trade him at that point, but I think that's the kind of value he would have next year, and I think it'd be trading too early. So I'd be really upset if they traded Jackson Wiggins. I think that it'd just be too early. They'd be selling low on him as opposed to selling high.
I'm glad you keep bringing up Jackson Ferris because Barb in our YouTube chat has been yelling about the Jackson Ferris trade since it happened in January.
Well, was he not the Dodgers minor league pitcher of the year? I'll give Barb knows.
Future Cy Young, generational pitcher. That's Barb.
Barb's not your mom, is she?
Yeah,
Greg, that's not your mom.
No,
is your mom named
Barb is very kind, but no.
Barb, I understand Barb's passion for it, but her reasoning has never made any sense. So it is what it is. You're definitely been pandering to her this entire show. So credit to you, Greg.
That's why I came on. It was only for Barb.
We had to do this for Barb because we've been supporting the Bush trade all season, all year.
He is the great Greg Huss from the Cubs On Deck podcast. Greg, we thank you for your time. 5 seconds for each guy. Favorite candy? Twix.
Snickers.
Kit Kat.
Greg?
Kit
Kat. Very good.
What about Batman?
Batman?
Oh.
Justice
is his favorite candy bar. That's going to do it for the TV side of today's show. Thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast. Remember, holidays are almost here, and this is for everybody out there. Yes, it's Halloween, but start thinking about the real holidays coming up now. Full holiday season. What are you going to give? What's the gift that shows you love somebody? Maybe you're dating. Maybe you're married. Maybe it's your mom, your dad. It's the DieHard card, right? Oh, yeah. $48, limited time only right now. The best deal we've ever had. It gets access to Batman. It gets access to all his content. It gets you the DieHard card, which is basically like the Batman symbol up in the sky. Same type of credit, street credit, and then all the discounts that come with being a great DieHard. It's everything you could ever want for a gift. It's $48, and it comes with the one-time free T-shirt from the dope merch list. You get this one, huh?
What if you can do it for Halloween? You just start trick or treaters giving out.
I was gonna say give out a card instead of candy. Maybe you give out a DieHard card to a kid today, and watch that kid light up like you've never seen eyes light up on a child before. What is this? Sorry, son. You don't want a Snickers. You want the Die Hard card. Thanks again to everybody that checked out the CHGO Cubs podcast. Cody's going to Mexico.
I'm going to Mexico.
2 weeks.
Cody's going to Mexico.
I'm going
Greg,
to Mexico for 2 weeks.
Thank you again, and thanks to everybody in the live YouTube chat. Until next week, fly the W.
We all silly like the mayor.